Welcome, everyone. Thank you for your interest in attending. We were very pleased to see the number of registrants and especially names that we don't already know. So this is, it's great to see that we're able to make some new connections here and maintain the ones we already have. So my name is Sarah North. I'm a project officer for the Combination Prevention Program at the European AIDS Treatment Group. So EATG for short. EATG was the lead organization on this eMPOWER project. And we did this in collaboration with two other organizations. One is the European Sex Workers' Rights Alliance, ESWA for short, and they were formerly known as ICRSE, so many acronyms. And the third organization involved is Legebitra out of Slovenia. So I'll give you a bit of an overview of generally about the organizations, about the roles that we had in this project, and what to expect for the rest of the presentations. So first off, I'll be speaking to introduce the project. Jules James from ESWA will be giving you some more insight into how we were monitoring and evaluating the content and logistics of our eMPOWER training program, and the lessons learned, recommendations that we have not only for ourselves, but to others who might be looking to do a similar training. And then Maja from Legebitra will be presenting on how we were assessing the psychosocial well-being of our participants, our trainees, and our peer trainers during this program with recommendations. And we also have Sudhra with us, who was our Toolbox Developer, online Toolbox Developer. I'll put the link in the chat because this has just gone live today. So it's launched, it's fresh, and we'll be presenting, or Kali will be presenting the toolbox to you and giving you an idea of how we put it together and the purpose behind that. So without further ado, I'm going to pull up the other PDF here, just one more PowerPoint. Here we are. You're seeing it okay? Cool. So just to give you a gist of the program, of the project, this project was funded through Erasmus+. They're one of the grants that they offered, and it was a one-year project. So it ran from 2021 until about the summer or spring of this year. And really what eMPOWER was about, it was essentially a response to COVID-19 and how everything was shifting to the online world. So, I mean, now it's very normal for us, but at the time it was considered, yeah, quite different. A lot of adapting had to be done when we were so used to having face-to-face trainings, meetings. So what we sought out to do with this project, the three organizations, was to first develop an online training program around sexual health, because the three organizations involved do a lot of work around sexual health and HIV, but we also work with specific populations. So for example, EATG, we're a patient-led organization that does a lot of research, advocacy, and capacity building around supporting people living with HIV and those communities who are closely affected. Hi, Yeet in the chat. And ESWA, of course, being a sex workers' rights organization, does exactly that. It's a sex worker-led and run organization in which Jules James is the health officer there, if I have that correct. And then Legebitra is, I believe, Slovenia's largest LGBTQIA NGO. And they also provide mental health services for youth, LGBT youth, and also HIV testing and support. So given our expertise and that, you know, all three organizations, just like many others within the region, had to shift our work online, we thought we would try and reach out to more so the youth advocates who are missing out from that face-to-face connection that maybe many of us benefited from early on into our our careers. So we, like I said, we set out to develop an online training program on a platform. We used Zoom to act as an exchange of good practices for youth who are advocates in the field of sexual health and rights, specifically for people living with HIV, sex workers, and LGBTI persons. Secondly, we wanted to create an online toolbox that would be useful for related advocacy around sexual health with the youth focus and also focused on human rights. And we wanted this to be something that's open, it's freely accessible to community moving forward. So as I mentioned, the 3 project partners are here, which I've gone over. So the first thing that we did was the 3 organizations, we launched a call looking to hire 4 peer trainers. And basically we were looking for individuals who were representative of the communities that we wanted to amplify and support. So that's, again, people living with HIV, sex workers, and LGBTI persons. So we recruited 4 peer trainers who were representative of the communities. They were between the ages of 18 and 30. And of course, because this is an Erasmus Plus project, we're located in one of the program countries. And we were looking for those who had some level of involvement in the field of sexual health advocacy, whether they might have been a bit more seasoned and were working in the field or volunteering, or maybe even early on and just starting out, but really were motivated to do this. So we had a lead trainer provide our 4 peer trainers with an overview of topics that were cross-cutting and intersectional to help our peer trainers then take that information, translate it, and build an online training program that they felt was needed and that was useful for other youth in the region. So the trainings that our 4 peer trainers received were around intersectionality, messaging and communication around HIV prevention, a focus on digital safety, and also looking at mental health. So while the overall content is very sexual health focused, we did want to tie in elements of mental health because obviously those 2 are quite closely linked. So this is an overview of what was done with the peer trainers, who then created our pilot training program. So for this, we then did a call for 25 participants. We actually received quite a large amount of applications for participants in this training program. So we had to make some difficult decisions, but we were able to narrow that down to 25 participants who met the criteria. It was an 8-week program. We had 2 training sessions per week, and each training session was 1.5 hours in duration. We included guest speakers, facilitated discussions, provided recommended readings, and once the training was complete, we provided certificates of completion to our trainees. So now that the training has wrapped up, we have 3 main project outcomes, which is what we're sharing with you today based on the training program. So first off, we have our monitoring and evaluation guide. So this really shares with you the framework that we used and how we measured and evaluated the quality of the content and logistics of the trainings. Secondly, we have a guide for assessing psychosocial well-being, sharing the approach and methods that we used, and recommendations from our lessons learned in that. And this was looking at the psychosocial well-being not only of our 25 trainees, but also our 4 peer trainers. And lastly, but not least, it's the online toolbox. So we had set out to really narrow down 20 resources specifically that could be used for youth sexual health advocates or those working closely with youth to use as kind of a building block when you're starting out providing an online sexual health training, specifically geared towards sex workers, people living with HIV and LGBTI persons. So I've just wrapped up within time. Presenting on our monitoring and evaluation report is Jules James. So Jules, you can take it away.
Thank you, Sarah. Quickly about myself. So I'm Jules James. I'm a sex worker and a program officer on health and well-being at ESWA, the European Sex Workers' Rights Alliance. And I've been a partner in this project together with Sarah from EATG and Maja from Legebitra. And I'm going to present you the monitoring and evaluation report. Do you all hear me well? Yeah, okay, good. So basically we had a monitoring and evaluation report to see how the project went, and yeah, you can go to the next slide, Sarah. So how did we monitor this project? So we had assessment surveys that took place before and after the selection of peer trainers and the selection of participants of the training. So yeah, we had like a pre-assessment survey before the peer trainers were hired to evaluate different things like their knowledge and their motivation, and also after they have been following the train-the-trainer training. And we had another pre-assessment survey when sending the call to participants, to trainees. And we had post-assessment surveys after each module. So we had 4 post-assessment surveys of trainees. You can go next slide, please. Yeah, so in the pre-assessment survey of peer trainers, we found out that they had quite broad knowledge on different topics, so related to HIV, LGBTQI+, and sex work, but also on like general and sexual health, mental health, and also digital safety. And we also measured their ability to openly talk about sex, since it was a focus of the training, and that was the case. So that's great. And in the post-assessment survey, after they followed the train-the-trainer training, we found that they assessed the quality of the train-the-trainer training quite well, and they appreciated the knowledge, the clarity, and the time management of the lead trainer. And again, when we did the pre-assessment survey of trainees, we looked at their motivation and what were their level of knowledge and skills in each area. So this was a way for us to know what was their baseline in terms of knowledge, and how what they learned during the training. And then we had 4 post-assessment surveys after each module. Next slide. Yeah, so quickly about the participant attendance to the sessions. So as you can go, it was pretty high at the first sessions until session 7. We started with 92% of attendance out of 25 people who were selected. And then the attendance dropped quite quickly, quite dramatically, like to half of the participants attending the training. So first, when participants registered, we knew that some people, due to their activism and their school as well, were not able to attend all the sessions. So there are certain absence that we knew in advance. But also, actually, when the attendance rate dropped out quite dramatically, is because also it's coincidence with the war in Ukraine. And for some of our participants, it meant that a lot of their activism work was increased because of the war in Ukraine, and they were welcoming, for example, LGBTQI refugees from Ukraine to their country, and also in terms of the war affecting their mental health. So that's the reason that we have for this dropping in attendance rates. When we assessed when we did the post-assessment surveys of the training session, Two main questions were the level of knowledge on the topic of the session, and also whether they were able to better deliver intersectional sexual health training to their peers. So this was the case. They gained in new knowledge, and they were more able to deliver future training on the topic. And then on the right side, you can see a graph. So we had actually graphs, similar graphs for each module. This one is just for module 1. So we asked them for each session how their level of knowledge was and has increased after the session. So for example, you can see on the top 3 graphs is the 3 first sessions on LGBTQI basics, HIV history and science, and sex work basics. And then we also assess their knowledge related to the guest speakers. So you can see Sabrina Sanchez, the coordinator of ESWA, was the guest speaker for the sex work basic. And also we had the last session on the intersection between HIV, LGBTQI, and sex work. And there we had an amazing guest speaker, Amanita Calderon Cifuentes. And you can see that their participants really enjoyed her presence and learned a lot from this guest speaker. So this was interesting, and it's basically more or less the same with each module. So there are sessions where participants felt they increased more their knowledge than other sessions, but overall they were satisfied and they gained new knowledge. Next slide. Yeah, so like I just said, satisfaction was pretty high about the training. Participants found that it broadened their knowledge on the topics, on different topics, and that it was a good, they could learn things that they could use for their work. So that was pretty important for us, that they could use in their activist work. And also we saw that they enjoyed a lot the breakout rooms to share more with other activists in other European countries. Next slide. We also had some suggestions for improvements. So what we did is that because we had this kind of assessment after each module, we tried to implement the suggestions for the next module. So this was quite interesting to see how to adapt also throughout the training. So the first suggestion for improvement were more technical suggestions, such as the audio of some guest speakers. So that's actually a good point to check internet connection, and because yeah, when this is not met, it's quite hard to then go to the next step and absorb knowledge. And also some participants shared that they would like to have more resources beyond the training sessions. So that's actually what we did after receiving these comments, and we shared like additional readings or resources for the next module. Next slide. The second suggestions were more about group dynamics. So about the level of interaction in the group. So that's something that actually pretty not always easy to mitigate, but some participants were participating more than others, and participants that were more introverts found it sometimes difficult to speak in a big group, and that's why they would have liked to have more discussions in smaller groups. And participants also shared that they would like to have time to discuss topics in a more informal manner, and it also included networking with other participants. So we can see from the quotes, more time to reflect as a group on what we have learned from the guest speaker. And also from the other quotes, activities in smaller groups and maybe more structured activities would have helped. So that's a good takeaways for next training. Next slide. So overall, we have different recommendations about input from the peer trainers themselves. So we found that it was useful to have the post-assessment to be able to measure whether they were prepared to carry out a pilot program after receiving knowledge from the lead trainer, and also to see what kind of support they need. And this kind of support actually was, we found it very useful to do a mini debrief before and after each training session. We had like 5 to 10 minutes debrief to prepare the session, go more smoothly, who does what, even if it's technical. And after also sessions, it was good to be able to share with each other how the session went, and yeah, also to be able to see what has happened, if certain things were intense emotionally, but also technically. And also we had longer debrief session between each module to be able to see what the participants shared in terms of evaluation, and to make adjustments to the program. Next slide. About training program design and logistics, we found it very useful to send an email reminder one day before, because people were quite overwhelmed with emails and information. So it was good to send an email reminder with the Zoom link, for example. We found that it was good to vary activity formats to maintain active participation. We tried to do that, but I think we could have done it even more. So that's a good also takeaway for future. And something important was to include peer trainers and guest speakers who were representative of the communities that we were trying to deliver the training for, and also to have diverse and intersecting backgrounds, so that trainees can identify with the peer trainers and guest speaker. And this is something actually that we managed pretty well. We had very different peer trainers and guest speakers with different experiences. We found it useful to leave time after the guest speaker presentation to allow for group discussion, and also about attendance and flexibility. We knew in advance that we had to remain flexible because of the community that we were trying to reach. So people have schools and other commitments, and also because of their activist work. So we had to remain flexible in people being able to attend the sessions. We did have a minimal amount of training session to attend in order to receive a certificate of completion, but that didn't prevent people from continuing attending the training if they couldn't attend certain sessions. We also sent all the slide decks after each module, and more online resources and optional reading. And we also tried to set up an online platform like Discord for participants to be able to discuss with each other in a more informal way. The issue is that we didn't really have the capacity to moderate the platform correctly, and so it wasn't really used by participants in the end. But that's something that we think could be actually quite useful for future training. Next slide. Thank you. About the monitoring and evaluation survey design and delivery. So we wanted to make sure that all the survey questions, because we kind of sent a lot of surveys to participants in different, like for the psychosocial well-being, and also for this monitoring and evaluation report. So it was very important that the survey questions were brief and clearly written, linked to the project objectives and the people's expectations, and also to have them balanced in numbers, to have not too many, so that people are not just like, oh, I just don't finish filling the survey because it's too long, but to still have interesting answers. And we had a mix of easy to complete questions, and also opportunities to give more detailed answers. And we found that sending survey to participants in a timely manner is quite important, because we want to have more real-time feedback. So actually what we did is we tried to set aside time aside at the end of the last session in each module, to make sure that participants were filling the survey within the session, so that we had actually more response rate than when participants have to fill it at home on their own time. And also, so another point was to adapt the training, the training session content to the answers of the surveys to have something flexible and adapted. Next slides. I think is that it or no? No. Yeah. So I'm gonna give the floor to Maja from Legebitra to present the psychosocial well-being. Thank you.
Thank you, Jules. As a part of the pilot training, we also carried out a psychosocial assessment, which included several questionnaires that the participants were asked to fill out before and after each session. This was to compare their well-being before and after, to find if there are any possible effects the session might have on how they felt. We did this using an online survey tool. We used the PANAS questionnaire, which measures general negative and positive effect, as well as some other questions regarding the structure of the session. And we also left space for an open-ended question to which the participants could answer with their general comments about the session and the training as a whole. Throughout the training, we received 167 valid responses to the pre-session questionnaires and 126 responses to the post-session questionnaires. Next slide, please. The trainers, the 4 peer trainers delivering the training were also asked to fill out a questionnaire. This was done after the end of each module. We used the PANAS questionnaire with some additional questions. And we also asked them to write down 5 words that would best describe what they think is important for their well-being. And it also included 2 open-ended questions. To this, we received complete answers from 2 out of the 4 peer trainers for the first, second, and the 4th module. On average, we found none of the results to be statistically significant due to the small numerous. However, the results indicate that participants' negative effect did not change due to the sessions, and that their positive effect was slightly higher after the sessions. Moving on to the next slide. Here on the right, you can also see some of their comments made to the open-ended questions. We included some of the interesting ones. Like I said, their negative effect didn't change when we compared their answers before and after. And the same was true for trainers. Next slide. Here you can see their answers to the statements we asked them to rate on a 5-point scale. So as for the participants, the trainers also, we noticed a slightly higher positive effect after the sessions. Next slide. So like I pointed out, we found that the participants consistently experienced more positive than negative feelings. And in response to the open-ended questions, they pointed out that they felt safe and that they enjoyed the more interactive elements of the training, such as discussions in smaller groups in the breakout rooms. They also indicated that they felt that the 90-minute long sessions were not too long or tiring, and that one 10-minute break was enough to keep them alert. As with participants, the trainers experienced more positive than negative feelings, and they pointed out that having support from the project partners before and after the sessions established boundaries and structure, and receiving feedback as important aspects which contributed to their well-being. Another thing they pointed out was that having short meetings that took place before the beginning of each session were very helpful and contributed to their well-being. From these results, as well as from other research, we derived some recommendations for ensuring the psychosocial well-being of everyone taking part in the online training. Aside from the technical aspects, such as ensuring a stable internet connection and a working microphone, we found that it's important to establish a safe or safer space for everyone, to set some ground rules for the group, to use content trigger warnings when sensitive topics are discussed, and to ensure everyone has ample time to express their opinion. Also, we would recommend incorporating interactive elements into the training, such as discussions, quizzes, and like Jules pointed out, inviting guest speakers from diverse backgrounds. Regarding well-being specifically, we recommend setting up a platform where participants and trainers can chat freely and share their thoughts and opinions. Another recommendation, and which was also used in the training, is appointing a so-called safe person at each session. In our case, this was one of the peer trainers to whom participants could turn to if they were feeling distressed or experienced any negative emotions. The safe person also had a list of important resources and crisis lines from different countries, so they could help the participants if needed. And last but not least, we would also recommend setting time aside after the session for reflection, to just take a few minutes with your fellow trainers or facilitators and discuss how they saw the session, how it was for them, what was good, and what could have been better. So that's in short what our recommendations are, and you can also find more on the methodology and the results in the guide itself. Thank you, and giving the floor to Kali.
Thank you, Maja, for your presentation. Hey, everybody, I'm Kali Sudhra. I am a sex worker. I also do sex education and write sometimes. And I'm also one of the board members for ESWA. So I'm really excited to be part of I was really excited to be part of this project and also work with the project partners. So the toolbox is the link that was shared before. and it's online now, so it's really exciting. I actually just got a little mini version of it before, and I was really, really happy. The reason why we created the toolbox, I mean, there was many different aims of the toolbox, but just kind of make it short and sweet. We wanted it to be an educative tool, mainly for activists, but also people that are not directly involved in activism can also access it and find out really relevant information. We wanted to make it publicly available. So again, not just like kind of, exclusively for activists, but just available for any organization that is working with these kind of themes I'll later talk about. We wanted to make it easily accessible and contain materials related to the mental health theme, sexual health, rights of people living with HIV, LGBTQI communities, and sex workers. We also wanted to support people with online training materials. So one of our main aims was to support youth activists by giving them reliable resources. A lot of the times in the days we're living in, there's like information overload, and like you just type in, I don't know, sex work into Google and you got all the different kinds of things. And we wanted to have like really information that was reliable, that was proven, that there had been studies about. So we really kind of dug deep into that to make sure that it was, accurate. And providing all these resources was to be able to help them have a building block for if they do decide to start their own online training sessions. We also made sure that there was on the online training materials, diverse materials and multimedia. Later I'll go into that. And it was also investigated not just by me, but was checked in with other professionals and project partners to make sure that it wasn't just biased information, me like, pushing my sex work agenda or something. It also, the recommendations, it includes EMPOWER specific reports, as we just heard, and recommendations for delivering online sexual health training, as they were just talking about, monitoring and evaluating of the online training content, and assessing of personal impact on such training, as Maja just talked about, in a way that's mindful of participants' well-being and psychological well-being, and also digital safety. So how do we create it? Well, it was a collaborative effort, as I said before, between project partners. We already mentioned at the beginning, the project partners that were EATG, ESWA and Legebitra, and we really worked together to, we had meetings in between, so to investigate like the drafts that I was creating to see if people were agreed with some of the things I was researching. We made themes, so it wasn't just all scattered. We focused on sex work, HIV, LGBTQI issues, and mental health. We also took time to create a summary of the resource. So when you're scrolling the toolbox, and there is a lot of information there, but if you want to quickly decide on if this resource is relevant to you or not, you'll have a summary there. We wrote that. We also took things into consideration, like relevant, like up-to-date relevant information. So like, when I was selecting documents, I wasn't trying to go for stuff that was like from, the 90s or early 2000s. I was trying to go for stuff that was, published within the last few years. We also used multimedia, which was in mixed media, which was my favorite part, because we all know that youth process information in probably different ways than other age groups, and so they need things that are like engaging. So for example, in the toolkit you'll find free online courses that just require you to send an email, and it doesn't have to be your real email. We put zines in there, which I think is a really cool way to learn. Also, like from firsthand experiences. I think the zine that we put in there was from sex workers, so it's really nice to hear from the firsthand of sex worker their experiences. We put guides and briefings, toolkits and frameworks all within the toolbox, so it's pretty helpful. If we go to the next slide, okay, the themes which I already kind of briefly touched upon: mental health as a main category, because it's one of the main factors that crosses all identities, groups and cultures. 2S 2S LGBTQI rights. I'm from Canada, so we usually use 2SL in the beginning. 2S is two-spirited for people that don't know, and you probably all know the rest of the acronym. It's there written. In this category, we explore gender identity toolkit and also a free online course, which is great. The online courses that you can do are self-paced, and especially if you just have kind of beginner knowledge, is a great way to dive in deeper. We also did the category of HIV. It's again a category that kind of crosses all of these identities, and it provides important information that affects many different groups, as well as sharing information on prevention and preventative medications. That was really with the help of EATG, because they obviously have very great expertise in this. And then sex work, which is another vital category, and the toolbox we were meant to tackle kind of misconceptions, cliches, and prejudice towards sex workers. There's some great documents in there that really work on those misconceptions. And lastly, who is a toolbox for? It's, again, I said, it's not just for youth activists. It can be volunteers, trainers, activists, advocates, people who work closely with youth, or people who just want to deliver an online sexual health and rights training program on very similar topics. So yeah, it's now live and available, so for public access. So please share with your friends, your communities, anybody you think it would be relevant to. And yeah, that's all I have to say. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Kelly. I'm going to stop sharing so that I can see everyone in the chat now, because we're at the point of the webinar where we'd like to open the floor a bit. If there were any questions from the participants here today, I've been looking through the chat a little bit. Thank you for the kind messages. And Jules was sharing the link for the toolbox within the chat multiple times. So yeah, were there any questions from participants here today? Any comments that you wanted to share? Okay, I'm going to ask you a question. So we're, oh, I see a question in the chat. I'm just going to read it out. And anyone from the team, Jules, Maja, Kali, can jump in. Someone has asked that, they said the toolbox looks great. It's super to see inclusion of trans, BIPOC, and sex workers. Could I ask if there's a disabled specific content in the toolbox?
Do you want me to answer, or would you answer?
If you could answer, and then I can moderate the questions.
Okay. Yeah, so a lot of the categories, I mean, for example, sex work, LGBTQI things, and mental health do touch upon, I mean, they do intersect with people with disabilities, but it doesn't, we don't have a specific category for people with disabilities. Now that I'm thinking about it, it's kind of probably maybe an oversight, but like, again, like in the documents that we choose, there is a lot of talk about people that live with disabilities, and people, like obviously sex workers that have mental health stuff going on, which is also considered disability. I don't know what else to say. Yeah, I was given like the 4 main categories in a revision because I left out the conversation on sex. Yes, I completely agree. Yeah, so I was working with basically the categories that I was given, and I also strongly agree with you said, and it definitely should be considered in our revision. Great, thank you.
Thank you for that. And that's interesting, and that question hadn't necessarily come up in our trainings. The focus was more so mental health, but this is I think, an important comment for other considerations. More questions in the chat. Please don't be shy to raise your hands and ask, but I'll just read this out. How do the partners in this European project find each other to share their powers? Thank you for framing it that way. I'll answer this. I believe it was EATG who initiated this partnership. One of our former project officers, who's in this meeting as well, who had a really strong working history and link specifically with Legebitra. And ESWA is an organization that EATG partners with quite regularly on different projects and activities. And both are definitely partnerships that EATG really wants to nurture and foster. So it seemed like a great fit, especially given our individual expertise. So Legebitra being more mental health, youth focused, but still sexual health. EATG being more HIV specific, and ESWA because sex workers are everywhere and we love them. So there are also a couple of participants in this webinar right now who were also part of the training. So if there's some of our trainees here who might have wanted to add some comments or questions, you're very welcome to do so, but also don't want to put you on the spot. I see one hand. Boyan.
Yes, hi everyone. So I'm the ex Legebitra and ex EATG guy. So first of all, yeah, congratulations for the project. I think you did really a great job. So maybe as I think as it was mentioned earlier, it was really idea to bring together different organizations, each of them specified in one specific field, but still working on the same issues. And yes, it was the project that started just when unfortunately COVID happened, and I think it also changed a lot the whole landscape of trainings, which I think even now after COVID, I think are more and more happening online and not face to face anymore. And the whole idea was, yes, of course, I mean, it's easy to just provide, I mean, relatively easy to provide knowledge itself, but what about the whole mental health aspects? I mean, we're talking about people, about activists who each of them come with their own story, with their own experience, and how to, offer this safe space, how to encourage this, personal growth that would help everyone to become a good activist and advocate for their own rights on national level. So yes, and also maybe just to add for the toolbox, I think it's also good that all the materials are basically cross-checked between all the three organizations from different fields. So I think it's good. So everything, I guess, what is there is really relevant for everyone. So yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Thanks for the addition, Boyan. There were a couple of questions more about our powers. So this project was only 1 year. Will there be a follow-up? Maybe. This is definitely something that we're looking into and to exploring further moving forward, because there does seem to be a need for this. I can say too, as being most project partners are present at every training session, and I have to say it was really inspiring, like leaving each session and hearing that people were gaining some new knowledge or feeling really motivated, or maybe even just validated in the discussions that were happening, I think was really quite special. And yeah, so I would hope to see something continue on. I think there is a need there. I think youth, like advocates, do want a place to meet. They do want to learn and expand their knowledge. So I would love to see this continue on. So another question asks, it would be great to hear how participants can or want to use the training. Do they need support to carry on, etc.? Are there activities that have happened since the training? Many questions, Ben. I'll start with the last one. And maybe if there's, I might need a bit more clarity for the first two, but since the training has finished, we've mostly been focusing on drafting the reports that have been presented by Jules and by Maja. So the monitoring evaluation and the psychosocial guide, and of course the toolbox with Kali. So that has been the main focus since that. But I know as project partners, we're all taking these recommendations into consideration and really trying to apply them to the future online trainings that we're doing. Did you want to elaborate more on the other questions, Ben, or to better address them?
I know that the partners are doing work. I was wondering what the participants are feeling like they can do, and or have done, you know, or plans, next steps.
That's an excellent question, because we did want these trainings to be impactful. So we wanted it to be something that could help elevate someone's experience in the field by giving them new skills or making new connections. So I'm not sure if Maja and Jules are aware of anything that's transpired from like after the training. But this is something that EATG has done previously with our step up training of an evaluation that was done some time later, where they were able to find out what participants had done to apply the knowledge that they learned. Unfortunately, we didn't have that element designed into the eMPOWER project. And I can't think, we're still in touch, more so by email, but Jules, you were gonna say something?
No, I think that's something that we definitely need to ask the participants before we close the project to see what how they are doing now, and also whether they could apply the knowledge or whether they plan on applying the knowledge in their local contexts. Definitely. So thank you for the question, Ben.
I think that would be great. And I think if they also identify obstacles too, that it would be really helpful for future activities, because I'm sure none of this is easy. And thanks, Jules.
Thank you. Yeah, I suppose all we can say is that the knowledge has increased perhaps in an area that they felt like they were a bit more weaker in going into the training. So hopefully they're applying that kind of perspective in their approach moving forward. So one thing that was mentioned by Jules was about the attendance rate. So it can be a big commitment to attend 2 sessions a week for a very condensed program. So, and of course, people have lives outside of this and other priorities or other, emergencies that come up. So, as project partners, we were discussing earlier and kind of curious if anyone who's attending the webinar today, if you are involved with providing online trainings, have you experienced similar issues around, maybe not an issue, but a similar experience of participation sort of dropping over time, or any recommendations you might have on better engaging people, youth specifically, to being able to attend an ongoing live training? It's kind of a reality, whether it's online or in person, but we were just curious. Okay, no worries. There's a chat question. Albert, were you responding to this?
Yeah, just in terms of engaging youth, I think that we underestimate the power of social media. and using that to engage with younger people. I was part of a group trying to do like smart consent classes, basically in second level education. And we were surprised by how much they actually got information through social media. So even like following up and even doing like feedback surveys through social media was actually quite effective in getting to hear what they wanted out of the program as well.
Excellent, thank you. And also it was mentioned that we did start a Discord channel, which wasn't a plan of the project, but it had come up because one of or a few of the participants had said, you know, is there an online platform we can use to communicate with each other and really network, because that's what's missing in the online world, is really having those moments in a coffee break or whatever it is after a session where we don't have that opportunity. So we did put together a Discord, and I think because it wasn't part of the initial plan, we weren't able to engage as much as we would have liked. But I would agree with Albert's comment that this could be, I mean, this is just one option, but of a way of maintaining communication, sending reminders, and continuing the conversations that were had during sessions, because many times we ran out of time. There was too much to say, and it never feels good having to end a really fruitful conversation early. So thank you for that point. And there was a question about the toolbox, to have it translated in different languages. Unfortunately, not. However, and I think this detail might have been left out in our slides, but both the monitoring and evaluation guide and the psychosocial guide are available in English, Russian, and Slovenian. But the remaining resources are all in English. Jules?
Yeah, just sorry to interrupt this question, but I just asked Lisa, who was a participant in the training, if she was willing to share her experience and maybe yeah, what you find useful, but also obstacles that you encounter, or how you would like to use the knowledge that you used that you got in the training. So Lisa, if you want to share a bit about your experience, that would be great.
Okay, thanks. That's a lot of questions. I hope I can make a coherent story out of that. I really like the training. I really like to be able to engage with these topics that are important to me in another way, and to speak with peers about it, and also have very hear very different stories and very different opinions about it. For me, this is also the first time that I really engaged on topics such as CEST work, which is my background, in a much more international atmosphere. I was usually used to doing that mostly in like a Dutch environment. And it was really interesting to hear challenges and opportunities that people experience in other countries. So that was a really valuable experience to me. Yeah, it was just generally really nice to meet all these people, and also as a networking opportunity. We also had a few trainings that were specifically focused on setting up a network and on setting up your own training and how to become an engaging activist, which I found really interesting, and I learned a lot from that, and I definitely will take that with me for the rest of my hopefully activism career. What I think can be improved, yeah, like you said already, sometimes we did not have enough time, and especially when there were triggering topics or when they were quite difficult topics, it's hard to put that in an hour and a half. And for me, it worked really well to put it in 8 weeks, an hour and a half, and otherwise it might have been more of a burden to even start the course. I think for a lot of people that works, it's nice to have it kind of like approachable in 8 weeks, but many of these topics aren't approachable in 8 weeks and are much require much more depth and much more intensity. So I don't really have a solution for that, but that's something I noticed, that it's important to give these heavy subjects the time they need and they require, while also keeping the length of the course and everybody's attention span alive. So I feel like that's something we can still work on, but I don't have an answer to that. But I loved it generally. So thank you so much for the experience.
Thank you, Lisa, for allowing us to put you on the spot. I really appreciate that. It's just very kind to hear. Were there any other comments or questions before we begin wrapping up? I'd say also, in addition to what Lisa had said, is, yeah, these are such complex topics and themes. It is hard to squeeze into 8 weeks, and especially because it's, things are ever evolving. So, we're learning about different terminology, where we're adapting to our environments. So it's definitely something that, requires much more time. Sabrina.
Yeah, I would like to jump quickly just to finish. I want to thank you, thank EATG, first of all, for initiating this project, and also for calling us and giving us our some space with the expertise that we have. Also, that's also thanks a lot for Jules for the great job that she has done, also in all the trainings, and also with the surfing with situations that would usually come from that's what you were saying, Sarah. That's the things that we need to learn from the different levels of knowledge that we sometimes have to balance here and have to juggle a little bit. And of course, thank you very much to Kali and all the people that have put their expertise also as well and worked really hard in this toolkit. That it's beautiful. It's very beautiful to see, and hopefully that it can be useful for activists, for young activists that we have to form, to educate, to give some skills so they can take our places for us, the people that are in the generation X, Z, and before. So they can have the good tools to have a great activism and very effective activism. So thank you very much, and this is all.
Thank you. And Sabrina is the director of ESWA, for those who are maybe not familiar. So I think that wraps up everything for today. We've already, mentioned that there is the desire, the interest to further explore continuing a similar project. We plan on using these recommendations. We hope they're useful for you. The reports, the resource materials. So feel free to share widely within your networks. And yes, thank you all for your attention today. That's it for now.